What if the most intimate moments of the royal family were never really what they seemed? Imagine scrolling through your feed, excitement building as the newest family photo goes live, only to feel something off. A tiny figure, a shadow, a light that doesn't quite match the rest of the scene. Something so subtle, so easily overlooked, that most people would scroll past it without thinking. But for a growing number of observers, it was a bombshell, the suggestion that the youngest royal, Lilibet, might not have been present in the image at all. That what millions of people assumed to be a candid family moment could have been carefully constructed or even digitally altered. From the very first glimpse of this photograph, there was a strange energy in the air. Fans and royal enthusiasts couldn't quite put their finger on it, yet something about the composition felt uncanny. It wasn't the smiles, the poses, or even the familiar backdrop of the family estate. It was the light. A subtle inconsistency, the kind of thing most casual observers would never notice, but a trained eye could detect in an instant. Shadows, highlights, the interplay of sunlight across faces and clothing, all appeared deliberate, almost too perfect. And that's when the questions began. How could one baby's image seem slightly out of place? Why did it appear as if the light on Lilibet didn't match anything else in the photo? For many, it was a moment of doubt, a crack in the polished facade of the couple's public image. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The photograph quickly gained traction online. Screenshots proliferated across social media, shared and reshared, dissected pixel by fans desperate to uncover the truth. At first glance, the image was heartwarming. A family gathered together, smiling, a glimpse of joy in a life that often seemed curated for the cameras. But the more people examined it, the more questions surfaced. The tiniest details, the barely noticeable shadows under a chin, the direction of sunlight hitting a shoulder, the angle of a foot or a hand, all began to tell a different story. And the story was unsettling. Experts in photography and digital imaging began to weigh in. One lighting analyst, speaking anonymously at first, shared a striking observation. The shadows on Lilibet were inconsistent with the rest of the scene. They didn't align with the source of natural light. Her body appeared illuminated in a way that suggested she had been added after the fact. This wasn't a minor error or an accidental reflection. It was a discrepancy large enough to suggest intentional manipulation. The implications were staggering. Could a royal couple, so constantly scrutinized by the public and the press, really go so far as to digitally insert their own child into an official image? And if so, why? This isn't just about photography. It's about trust, authenticity, and the way public figures craft their narratives. Every image, every post, every public appearance is filtered through layers of intention, curation, and, at times, calculation. When fans look at a family photograph, they expect honesty. They expect a moment of truth captured in pixels. But what happens when that truth is manufactured? The line between reality and performance begins to blur, and suddenly, even the most intimate scenes are subject to doubt. The royal family, with its centuries of tradition and ceremony, has always been a master of image control. But the digital age changes everything. A photo that can be edited and retracted in minutes, yet live on in the public consciousness forever. What does that mean for credibility, for legacy, for public trust? Social media played a pivotal role in exposing this anomaly. Within hours of the image appearing, fans began sharing screenshots, noting oddities, and theorizing about the source of the inconsistency. Twitter threads exploded, dissecting every detail. YouTube commentators uploaded videos with side-by-side comparisons, highlighting shadows that didn't line up and reflections that didn't match the rest of the scene. Every new analysis brought more eyes, more scrutiny, more debate. The internet, as always, refused to let the story fade quietly into the background. And for those who monitor the royals closely, this was both fascinating and alarming. For the first time, a seemingly minor detail, a shadow, a slant of light, a digitally suspicious child, had sparked a worldwide conversation. The alleged attempt to retract the photograph only added fuel to the fire. According to insider accounts, once the couple or their team noticed the growing speculation, they sought to remove the image from official channels. But by then, it was too late. Screenshots, reposts, and viral shares had ensured the image would live on indefinitely. And with every re-examination, the evidence pointing to potential editing seemed to grow stronger. It's one thing to manage appearances in public life. It's another entirely to manipulate reality in a way that millions of people are watching, analyzing, and dissecting. The stakes had been raised, and the public's curiosity turned into near-obsessive scrutiny. So why would anyone go to such lengths? Some suggest it's about privacy, about controlling how a newborn is presented to the world. Others argue it's about narrative, about constructing an image that aligns perfectly with a desired public perception. Whatever the reason, the act, intentional or not, has repercussions far beyond a single photograph. It touches on ethics, media responsibility, and the nature of truth in an era where every detail can be magnified, dissected, and debated. What was meant to be a tender family moment has now become a lightning rod for speculation, drawing attention to questions no one had dared to ask before. Is everything we see online real? And if it's not, what does that say about the people we trust to guide the royal family's image? Amidst this swirl of speculation, the human element cannot be overlooked. Lilibet, the youngest member of the family, has become the center of a public debate she cannot even comprehend. Her presence, or lack thereof, has sparked analysis, discussion, and controversy on a global scale. For Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, navigating this landscape is more complex than ever. How do you maintain authenticity when every detail is under a microscope? How do you preserve a sense of family intimacy when every photograph can be dissected, scrutinized, and questioned? And for the public, how do you reconcile the desire to see genuine moments with the realization that what is presented might be carefully crafted, curated, or even fabricated? The tension between appearance and reality is nothing new for the royals, but in the digital era, it's magnified exponentially. Every image is not just a snapshot. It's a statement, a tool, a narrative. And when the narrative is called into question, even subtly, it has the potential to disrupt the carefully constructed perception of an entire family. The shadows that might indicate a manipulated image are more than just technical inconsistencies. They are symbols of the fragile line between public image and private reality, between storytelling and truth, between what is seen and what is real. And now, as the world continues to analyze the photograph, one question lingers above all others. Was Lilibet truly part of this captured moment, or was she digitally placed there to craft a story, to protect privacy, or perhaps to shape perception? The evidence, though circumstantial, is compelling. The inconsistencies in shadows and lighting, the swift attempt to retract the image, and the rapid spread of screenshots have all combined to create a situation that is as riveting as it is mysterious. Fans, experts, and casual observers alike are left with a sense of unease, a nagging doubt that what they thought they knew might not be the full story. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The photo had gone viral, and the world was watching. But why did something so seemingly innocent feel wrong? That's the question that haunted fans and critics alike. People stared at their screens, squinting, zooming in, and debating what they were seeing. Something about the way the light fell, the shadows stretched across the grass, and the tiny figure of Lilibet just didn't feel natural. It was subtle, yes, almost imperceptible, but once you noticed it, there was no one seeing it. A small detail that cast a shadow, both literal and metaphorical, over what was supposed to be a joyous family moment. The setting itself was picture-perfect. A sun-drenched garden, lush greenery framing the royal family in their finest attire. The kind of backdrop designed to communicate warmth, happiness, and accessibility. Smiles were carefully placed, arms draped just so, every detail seemingly orchestrated to evoke genuine family intimacy. Yet despite the idyllic scene, a chill ran through those scrutinizing eyes. For every hand resting naturally on a shoulder, every tilt of a head perfectly captured, there lurked a nagging doubt. Something was off. And it wasn't just the casual observer feeling this. It was experts, people trained to detect manipulation, who began raising eyebrows. Fans were quick to dissect every angle. Twitter threads lit up within hours, with dozens of posts comparing shadows, examining angles, and asking whether the image had been altered. Why does Lilibet's shadow fall differently than the rest? One post read, "Look at the way the light hits her face." "It's all wrong," said another. YouTube commentators posted side-by-side analyses, showing frame-by-frame breakdowns that most people would have never noticed on their own. And as the engagement grew, so did the speculation. What was meant to be a quiet family snapshot had become an international conversation starter. But the story doesn't end with fan theories. The moment this image was first analyzed by professionals, the situation took on a whole new dimension. A lighting expert, one who had worked on high-profile editorial shoots, claimed the light hitting Lilibet was inconsistent with natural conditions. Shadows on her tiny body didn't match the rest of the group. Highlights were sharper, the angle didn't correspond with the sun's position, and even the way the fabric of her clothing reacted to light appeared unnatural. To a casual eye, it might have gone unnoticed. But to someone trained in the nuances of photography, it was a glaring inconsistency. Consider this: shadows are unforgiving. They are dictated by physics. They don't lie. When a photo is taken outdoors in natural light, shadows will always fall according to the sun's angle. Yet here, a single shadow, one so small, associated with the youngest member of the royal family, broke that universal rule. And when someone tried to explain it away as a mere trick of perspective, other anomalies surfaced. Her reflection, barely noticeable, clashed with nearby surfaces. The contours of her figure didn't seem to merge naturally with the rest of the composition. It was as if Lilibet had been carefully inserted, like a missing puzzle piece placed after the fact. At this point, social media became an amplified magnifying glass. Fans weren't just curious, they were relentless. They dissected every pixel, every line of contrast. Reddit threads dedicated to image analysis exploded overnight. Every day, new theories emerged. Was this about protecting privacy, controlling public perception? Or was it something more deliberate, a calculated move to create a narrative that didn't exist in reality? Questions that seemed ridiculous just a week earlier were now being asked by millions. Can we trust a royal photo anymore? And if the youngest member of the family might be digitally inserted, what does that say about everything else we see in their curated public life? Meanwhile, the alleged attempt to retract the photograph added another layer to the intrigue. According to insiders, once Harry and Meghan, or their media team, noticed the growing scrutiny, the photo was quietly removed from official channels. But the internet never forgets. Screenshots were everywhere. Copies circulated on fan sites, forums, and social media. Even those who had never seen the original image now felt compelled to join the conversation, drawn into a debate over something they had never even observed firsthand. The attempt to erase the photo didn't quell speculation, it fanned the flames. And when a retraction is paired with questions about authenticity, the public doesn't forgive easily. Every action, or inaction, becomes part of the story. What's striking about this entire saga is the intersection of technology, media, and family life. In the past, family photos were intimate, private, and fleeting. A snapshot was taken, printed, maybe shared with relatives, and that was the end of it. Now, every frame is immortal, every image permanent, every digital detail available for scrutiny. For a family whose lives are already under constant surveillance, this presents an entirely new challenge. A single photograph can no longer simply depict a moment. It must withstand an entire world of analysis. And when even one tiny element appears suspicious, it threatens credibility on a global scale. Consider the emotional implications as well. Lilibet, innocent and oblivious, has become a focal point for worldwide speculation. Her presence, or absence, is now a symbol of trust, authenticity, and parental choice. For Harry and Meghan, the stakes are enormous. Every smile, every pose, every gesture is now scrutinized not just for what it conveys in the moment, but for what it may hide. And the public, conditioned to expect transparency from those in power, struggles to reconcile affection with manipulation, reality with performance. Then there's the human factor behind the lens. The photographer, the team managing the image, the lighting experts. Each layer adds its own tension. What pressures existed in that moment to present the perfect family scene? How much of the image was organic, and how much was orchestrated? Some reports suggest that Meghan, the official photographer, noticed public scrutiny and attempted to quietly retract the photo. But the truth is rarely contained. By the time the retraction occurred, millions had already seen, screenshotted, and shared the image. The very act of removing it confirmed the doubts. An image that was meant to capture innocence and warmth had inadvertently created controversy, uncertainty, and global debate. The narrative also raises broader questions about perception and reality in a world obsessed with curated images. When viewers see a photograph, they assume authenticity. A child in a family portrait should be real, tangible, present. Yet here, millions of people are questioning the authenticity of a baby. The idea seems almost absurd. How could a family, already under scrutiny for every choice, risk the public discovering an alteration so intimate? And yet, the evidence, shadows, lighting, reflections, compels the audience to reconsider everything. This is no longer just a royal family story. It's a cautionary tale about trust, technology, and the fragility of public perception. As the weeks passed, the photo became a touchstone for discussion. Journalists debated the implications, royal commentators speculated on intentions, and photographers broke down the technical aspects for mainstream audiences. The conversation was no longer limited to fan circles. It had gone global. Every major outlet covered it. Every pundit had an opinion. Every fan theorist had a breakdown. The smallest shadow, the faintest light anomaly, became a battleground for truth, a symbol of the modern struggle between reality and representation. And yet, for all the attention, the central question remained unanswered. Was Lilibet actually present in that photo? Was she inserted digitally, carefully positioned to maintain privacy, or to tell a story the public wanted to see? Or was this all an overreaction by observers, reading too much into what was simply a coincidental shadow? The uncertainty is what makes this story so compelling. It isn't just about a single image. It's about how we interpret the images presented to us, how we trust or fail to trust the people who create them, and how small details can spark global debate. The photograph, now iconic for reasons nobody intended, stands as a paradox. On one hand, it's a tender glimpse into the life of a young family. On the other, it's a puzzle, a mystery, a subtle controversy with layers of technical evidence and human emotion intertwined. Fans continue to examine, debate, and dissect, each new analysis opening doors to further speculation. And as the world watches, the tension builds, not just over what the image shows, but over what it hides. Every angle, every pixel, every light and shadow could contain the answer. And every answer raises more questions. But what came next would shock even the most skeptical observers. And it wasn't just about a shadow or a digital anomaly. The moment an expert stepped into the conversation, everything changed. Suddenly, this wasn't just a fan theory or a viral internet debate. It had credibility. One lighting analyst, someone who had worked on high-profile fashion shoots and celebrity portraits, examined the photograph with a critical eye. His conclusion was alarming. The light on Lilibet did not match the rest of the image. The shadows, the highlights, even the tiniest reflection of sunlight off her clothing were inconsistent. For most people, this might sound like a minor technical detail. For professionals, it was a red flag, one that suggested deliberate editing. From the very first frame, he noticed subtle anomalies. Lilibet's shadow fell at a slightly different angle compared to the other family members. Her highlights were sharper, almost unnatural, giving her a slightly detached appearance. The direction of light on her face didn't correspond with the apparent sun source, and her little hand seemed to catch light that no other object in the photo did. To a casual observer, these differences were almost imperceptible, easily dismissed. But when examined under professional scrutiny, they told a story. Imagine for a moment trying to capture the perfect family portrait. Every detail matters. The angle of the camera, the position of the sun, the arrangement of people, and the natural interplay of shadows and light. In a professional setting, even the slightest mismatch is noticeable. But in this case, the mismatch wasn't slight. It was subtle enough to be overlooked by most, yet glaring to anyone trained to see it. The expert explained that natural light is predictable. Shadows have direction, intensity, and softness, all dictated by the light source. When one element violates those rules, it can indicate manipulation, digital insertion, composite editing, or staged lighting. The analyst's observations didn't stop at shadows. He noted that Lilibet's presence seemed almost too perfect, as if someone had meticulously placed her into the scene after the fact. Her positioning aligned flawlessly with the composition of the group, her posture ideal, her expression perfectly captured. The more he examined it, the more it resembled a constructed image rather than a spontaneous moment. And the more he spoke, the more intense the scrutiny became. His comments added weight to what had previously been just speculation. News of his findings spread quickly. Journalists, bloggers, and social media commentators picked up the story. Headlines exploded. Lighting expert suggests Lilibet photo was edited, and shadows don't lie. Could the princess have been inserted? Across forums, fans debated the plausibility of such a claim. Some dismissed it outright, accusing the expert of overanalyzing, of seeing patterns that weren't there. Others clamored for more evidence, digging into every pixel, every angle, every possible explanation. And in the middle of it all, the analyst remained firm. The inconsistencies were real, and they were telling a story. He demonstrated, for example, how the sunlight on the rest of the family produced long, soft shadows stretching naturally across the ground. Lilibet's shadow, however, was shorter, sharper, and seemed disconnected from the same light source. The expert also pointed out reflections on nearby surfaces, noting that no other element in the scene caught light in the same way her tiny figure did. He compared the image to a series of reference photos taken at the same location and time of day, highlighting the stark contrast. The evidence, in his eyes, was clear. Something had been altered. What made the situation even more compelling was the timing. By the time the photograph circulated widely, the public had already begun forming opinions. The expert's analysis provided a framework to interpret what many viewers had intuitively felt. Suddenly, people weren't just speculating. They had a professional opinion to guide their suspicions. And that professional opinion suggested something extraordinary. The youngest royal might have been digitally placed in the family photo. As the conversation intensified, questions emerged that went beyond photography. If Lilibet had been edited into the image, why? Was it to protect privacy? Was it to manage public perception? Or was there another motive entirely? The expert refused to speculate on intent, focusing strictly on the technical evidence. But viewers and commentators filled the void with their theories. Some argued that the couple simply wanted to control how their child was introduced to the world. Others suggested a more calculated effort to maintain a narrative of an ideal family, one unmarred by the messy realities of life in the public eye. The analyst's credibility was amplified by his track record. He had worked with celebrities, high-fashion magazines, and advertising campaigns where image manipulation was routine. His name lent weight to the observations, turning casual debate into serious discussion. For the first time, this was not merely fan speculation. It was professional scrutiny. And when professionals spoke, the public listened. In interviews, he explained his methodology. Using advanced tools, he mapped the light source, traced shadows, and analyzed the digital footprint of the image. He noted inconsistencies in pixels, edges, and gradients that suggested more than a simple adjustment in brightness or contrast. These weren't anomalies that occurred naturally. They were the kind of subtle signs left behind when something is digitally inserted. He even ran side-by-side comparisons with untouched images from the same setting, showing the striking differences in how light interacted with Lilibet's figure versus the other family members. The revelation was astonishing for many. People who had thought they were seeing a candid, intimate moment began to reconsider everything. If one element of the photo had been manipulated, what else might have been? The analyst did not claim to know the motivations, nor did he speculate about deceit. But his technical conclusions were difficult to ignore. The shadows, the highlights, the reflections, they all pointed to one uncomfortable possibility. The youngest royal might not have been present in that moment. Audience reactions ranged from shock to disbelief. Online forums buzzed with debates about ethics, authenticity, and the nature of public image. Some fans defended the family, suggesting that digital insertion for privacy was a reasonable choice. Others felt betrayed, arguing that manipulating such an intimate image crossed a line. And still, more people questioned the very nature of public perception. If one photo could be edited, what about countless others? The discussion had moved beyond a single image, touching on trust, media ethics, and the responsibilities of public figures in the digital age. But the story didn't stop there. The expert revealed something even more surprising. By analyzing the subtle interaction between light and surrounding objects, trees, grass, and even the clothing of other family members. He suggested that Lilibet's position in the image was inconsistent not only with lighting, but with spatial relationships. In simple terms, she seemed to float slightly above the plane where she should have been standing. This was not obvious at first glance, but once identified, it was impossible to ignore. Combined with the shadow inconsistencies, it painted a picture that was increasingly hard to dismiss. And yet, despite the mounting evidence, the public remained divided. Some viewers clung to the idea that digital manipulation was harmless, a tool used to protect a child's privacy. Others argued it represented a deeper issue, a willingness to control reality, to craft a story for public consumption. It wasn't just about a baby in a photograph. It was about trust, authenticity, and the intersection of private life and public image. The experts' conclusions also triggered reactions from media outlets and journalists. Headlines proliferated. Lighting expert raises questions about royal baby photo. Shadows suggest Lilibet may have been edited in, and technical analysis sparks global debate over royal family image. Each story, each post, each shared screenshot amplified the controversy. And as the world examined the evidence, one question began to dominate. If the youngest royal had been digitally inserted, was this a first for the family, or had similar techniques been used in the past? The expert declined to answer questions about intent, focusing strictly on technical evidence. Yet the implications were inescapable. People began questioning the authenticity of images, the transparency of public figures, and the ethics of image manipulation at the highest levels. The shadows, once unnoticed, had become the center of a global conversation. And with every analysis, every new comment, every shared screenshot, the story gained momentum, feeding the growing public fascination with the photograph. But just when it seemed the experts' analysis had provided the definitive technical assessment, new evidence emerged that complicated everything. A behind-the-scenes account suggested that the photograph had been reviewed and possibly edited before release, not by the couple directly, but by a team tasked with managing the royal image. The possibility that someone had altered the image for reasons of privacy, narrative control, or public relations added a layer of intrigue that few had anticipated. The photograph was no longer just a snapshot. It was a carefully managed artifact, carrying hidden stories and deliberate choices. And yet, even with these revelations, the most shocking part had yet to be revealed. The expert hinted at something he had discovered in the shadows themselves, a detail so small, so subtle, that it had eluded everyone until he pointed it out. What he found would challenge everything previously assumed about the image, casting doubt not just on one photograph, but on the very way the public perceives the youngest members of the royal family. The world watched, waited, and speculated. Experts had spoken. Fans had analyzed. Media had reported. And in the midst of it all, one tiny figure, the youngest royal, had become the epicenter of global debate. But what he uncovered in the shadows of that photograph would send shockwaves that no one saw coming. Could the youngest royal, barely a toddler, have been digitally inserted into a family photograph? At first, the idea sounded almost absurd. Lilibet, the adorable baby of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, smiling in the sunlight, standing with her parents. It was the image of innocence, a snapshot of family life that millions cherished. And yet, as the experts' analysis spread across social media, a new narrative began to form. Suddenly, the very presence of Lilibet in the photograph was questioned. The whispers started small, a few threads here, a few comments there. But soon, those whispers became a roar. Fans, journalists, and casual observers alike began examining the image more intensely than they ever had a royal photograph before. Zooming in, they studied the baby's tiny hands, the tilt of her head, and the direction of her gaze. Something about her placement felt off, not in an obvious way, not something most people would notice on first glance, but subtle discrepancies, the curve of a shadow, the angle of the light, began to suggest that Lilibet might not have been physically present when the photograph was taken. And the more people looked, the more compelling the evidence appeared. It wasn't just the lighting. Observers noticed that the way her clothing caught the sun didn't align with the surrounding environment. The folds and creases in her little outfit reflected light differently from the fabrics worn by her parents. Even the texture of the grass under her feet seemed inconsistent with the rest of the scene. To the untrained eye, these differences might appear negligible. But to those analyzing the photograph critically, they suggested manipulation. The idea that the baby could have been added digitally shifted from theory to possibility, and once it entered the public imagination, there was no turning back. Social media exploded. Reddit threads, Twitter posts, and Instagram stories dissected every pixel. Fans labeled her the invisible princess and debated theories about why the photo might have been altered. Some argued it was for privacy, an attempt to protect the youngest member of the family from constant public scrutiny. Others suggested it was about narrative control, a way to present a picture-perfect moment to the world. Every theory was discussed, challenged, and expanded upon. And as the debate grew, the photograph itself became almost irrelevant. It was the questions it raised that fascinated the world. The technical evidence combined with emotional reactions to create an intense mixture of intrigue and skepticism. On one hand, people wanted to believe in the innocence of the image, in the joy of a family moment frozen in time. On the other hand, the evidence, the inconsistencies, and the expert analysis suggested something far more calculated. The tension between belief and evidence created a unique dynamic. The more the photograph was scrutinized, the less certain anyone could be about what they were seeing. For the parents, Harry and Meghan, this must have been surreal. Their child, meant to be shielded from the relentless glare of public attention, was now the center of speculation. It's easy to imagine the tension they might have felt, knowing that a single photograph, intended perhaps as a simple family portrait, had become a global talking point. Every gesture, every smile, every tiny detail of Lilibet's appearance was under scrutiny, and every moment of public life, already constrained by the spotlight, became more complicated. The idea that a child could be digitally inserted into a photograph raises profound ethical and emotional questions. Is it acceptable to manipulate a family image for privacy? Does the potential protection of the child justify the deception? Or does such an action risk eroding trust, turning intimate moments into objects of suspicion? These questions are not easily answered, and they create a tense narrative in which both the public and the family are participants. Every detail matters. Every pixel is scrutinized, and every reaction becomes part of the story. Observers began to piece together more evidence, layering technical analysis with behavioral clues. Some noted that the baby's posture seemed almost too perfect, as if posed rather than captured in a natural moment. Her gaze was perfectly aligned with the camera, her expression serene and composed, unusual for a child of her age in an outdoor setting. Even the way she was framed in the photograph suggested a careful composition, one that could be achieved in post-production as easily as in real life. The combination of technical anomalies and public speculation created a feedback loop. Analysts, fans, and media outlets fed off each other's theories, each new observation amplifying the perceived evidence of manipulation. The discussion extended beyond the photograph itself, touching on broader questions of privacy, celebrity, and the role of media in shaping public perception. Lilibet, the infant at the center of this scrutiny, became an unwitting symbol for the tension between public fascination and private life. Yet the story took an even stranger turn when insider accounts began to surface. Sources close to the royal family hinted that the photograph had been carefully reviewed before release. Decisions were made not only about composition, but also about who and what should appear in the frame. Whether these decisions involved digital alteration remained unconfirmed, but the possibility added another layer of intrigue. Suddenly, the public was not just debating pixels. They were speculating about intent, strategy, and the lengths to which the family would go to control their image. This tension reached its peak when viral threads began highlighting anomalies that even casual viewers could notice. The baby's shadow, the texture of her clothing, the slight difference in lighting, all became points of obsessive discussion. Online communities dissected the image frame by frame, highlighting inconsistencies in ways that professional photographers and laypeople alike found compelling. The conversation had shifted from, "Is the baby there?" to "Why would anyone manipulate such an intimate moment?" And then there were the emotional stakes. Lilibet's presence or absence raised questions about perception, identity, and authenticity. For millions of viewers, seeing a child in a family photograph evokes warmth, innocence, and connection. But when the image itself is questioned, those emotions are complicated by doubt and suspicion. The photograph, intended to convey joy, now carried an undercurrent of uncertainty. Fans questioned their own perceptions. Could they trust what they saw? Were they complicit in accepting a manufactured reality? By this point, the narrative had moved far beyond the technical analysis of shadows and lighting. The idea of Lilibet as the invisible princess had taken hold, fueled by social media, expert commentary, and public imagination. The photograph had become a touchstone for a broader conversation about privacy, authenticity, and the digital manipulation of images. Every new post, every shared screenshot, every viral thread reinforced the tension between what was seen and what was real. And yet, as compelling as these observations were, the most astonishing aspect remained hidden in plain sight. Experts suggested that the inconsistencies in the photograph might be more than just technical errors. They could be deliberate clues, subtle signs left by someone who knew the public would notice. If true, this would imply a level of foresight and strategy that few could have anticipated. The shadows, the highlights, and the perfect positioning of Lilibet could all be intentional, designed to create a specific impression while protecting something far more private. The public, meanwhile, remained captivated. Comments poured in from around the world. Some defended the family, citing privacy and protection as justification. Others criticized them, arguing that manipulating such an intimate image was a breach of trust. And still others simply marveled at the technical aspects, fascinated by how subtle changes in light and shadow could spark global debate. The discussion had become as much about perception and emotion as it was about pixels and photography. But the story didn't end there. As analysts continued their work, new evidence emerged. Evidence that suggested the anomalies were not accidental, that the image may have been carefully constructed for reasons beyond mere convenience. Every detail mattered: the angle of the sunlight, the subtle tilt of a head, the faint outline of a shadow. The smallest clues hinted at a much larger narrative, one in which Lilibet's image was more than just a photograph. It was a statement, a carefully managed depiction of a family navigating the complexities of fame, privacy, and public expectation. And even as speculation reached a fever pitch, the most startling revelation was still to come. The inconsistencies, the digital fingerprints, the expert analysis, all pointed to a truth that would challenge everything the public thought they knew about the youngest royal. But what came next would make the question of Lilibet's presence even more shocking, and it was a detail that no one, not even the experts, had anticipated. Shadows don't lie. That's the mantra every photographer, cinematographer, and visual artist knows instinctively. Shadows are a direct reflection of light, a signature of reality. They reveal angles, depth, and position, and they are governed by the laws of physics. When shadows behave unexpectedly, when they fail to align with light sources or distort in subtle ways, something is amiss. And in the case of Lilibet's photograph, shadows became the most compelling evidence that the image might not be what it seemed. The first thing that drew expert attention was the direction of light. The sun, natural and consistent, cast shadows predictably. People standing side by side outdoors under a single light source should exhibit shadows that align in the same general direction. In this photograph, however, every family member except Lilibet conformed perfectly to the expected pattern. The shadows fell naturally across the lawn, stretching in harmony with the angle of sunlight. But the tiny shadow beneath Lilibet's feet deviated. It was shorter, sharper, and angled slightly differently. At first glance, most observers wouldn't notice. But to someone trained in the subtle language of light and shadow, it was undeniable. The expert explained this phenomenon using a simple analogy. Imagine holding a flashlight over a group of objects in a dark room. Every object casts a shadow, but if you introduce one object after the fact, digitally added in a photo editing program, the shadows may not align perfectly with the light source. They might appear brighter or darker, slightly misaligned, or even inconsistently blurred. In the photograph of Lilibet, that misalignment was subtle yet present. And shadows aren't just about direction. They are also about intensity and softness. Sunlight produces soft-edged shadows that gradually fade into the surrounding space. Artificially inserted subjects often have shadows that are too sharp or too faint because they don't interact with the environment naturally. In this photo, The shadows surrounding Lilibet's figure were unusually crisp compared to the soft shadows of her parents. The difference was slight, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye, but consistent enough to suggest manipulation. Beyond the shadows themselves, reflections also raise questions. Light bounces, refracts, and diffuses across surfaces. On grass, sunlight produces subtle variations. On clothing, it creates highlights and contours. But Lilibet's highlights seemed to catch the light differently than the grass beneath her or the fabric of her outfit. Even the angle of her gaze seemed to interact with light in a way that contradicted natural illumination. These anomalies, taken together, created a visual inconsistency that was difficult to dismiss. The online community quickly latched onto these details. Amateur photographers, digital artists, and everyday fans began analyzing the image using free software, tracing shadows, and comparing angles. What emerged was a consensus. The shadows did not conform to the natural logic of sunlight. Discussions on forums grew heated, with some arguing the differences were minor or the result of camera distortion. Others claimed the inconsistencies were glaring, undeniable signs of digital intervention. The debate itself became part of the narrative, a global conversation sparked by something as simple and precise as a shadow. The implications extended beyond technical analysis. Shadows, after all, are a metaphor for truth. If the shadow can be manipulated or misrepresented, the perception of reality itself becomes questionable. For a royal family already scrutinized under a global microscope, this was particularly significant. Public trust, already fragile, could be shaken by what might appear to be a small discrepancy. The idea that a child could be digitally inserted into a photograph raised ethical questions. Should such manipulation ever occur? What does it say about authenticity when even the most intimate family moments can be engineered for public consumption? The analyst went further, demonstrating how subtle inconsistencies in shadows could be detected using common photographic techniques. He showed that by examining the angle, length, and intensity of shadows relative to the apparent light source, one could determine whether a subject had been added post-production. When he applied these techniques to the royal photograph, the anomalies became undeniable. Lilibet's tiny shadow did not align. It didn't just fail a casual check, it violated the basic principles of natural illumination. What made this revelation particularly striking was its subtlety. It was not an obvious flaw or a glaring mistake. It was a whisper, almost invisible unless you knew how to listen. And that subtlety made it all the more compelling, fueling speculation that the image had been meticulously edited. Someone had gone to great lengths to craft a believable scene, yet left behind the tiniest imperfection, the shadow, that hinted at an artificial origin. The emotional impact on viewers was immediate. Many were shocked, disbelieving that something so small could provoke such debate. Others felt a sense of betrayal, as if the photograph they had trusted as a genuine family moment was now tainted. Even casual fans began questioning what other images of the family might be carefully curated or manipulated. The shadows, a minute detail, became a symbol of both intrigue and uncertainty. And the tension didn't end there. By analyzing the interplay of shadows and light further, experts discovered additional anomalies. Certain areas of the grass showed inconsistent brightness near Lilibet's feet. Small highlights on her clothing appeared sharper than they should have, given the diffuse natural light. Even the slight shadow cast by her hand didn't merge seamlessly with the surrounding ground. These observations reinforced the suspicion that the baby's image had been inserted digitally, possibly to protect privacy, but also raising questions about authenticity and intent. Public reactions mirrored the complexity of the analysis. On social media, hashtags and threads debated the ethics, the technical evidence, and the implications of a possible digital insertion. Critics argued that manipulating a child's image for public consumption undermined trust. Supporters suggested that privacy concerns could justify subtle edits. Others focused purely on the technical fascination, marveling at how a single shadow could provoke global scrutiny. And yet, for all the debate, a single truth remained. Shadows, unlike public opinion, cannot be faked. They follow immutable laws of physics. When a shadow behaves in a way that defies natural rules, it tells a story, whether the creators of the image intend it to or not. In this photograph, The inconsistencies in Lilibet's shadows were telling a story the family may have hoped to keep hidden. The narrative deepened as additional digital forensic experts weighed in. Using high-resolution analysis, they confirmed the presence of anomalies in shadow alignment and lighting gradients. They examined edges, highlights, and texture blending, concluding that something in Lilibet's figure appeared inconsistent with the rest of the composition. The combined weight of professional opinion, public scrutiny, and technical analysis made the idea of a manipulated photograph increasingly compelling. But the most startling discovery came when one expert began mapping the shadows against the surrounding environment. Trees, furniture, and other objects cast shadows that aligned perfectly with natural light. Lilibet's figure alone broke the pattern. The difference wasn't huge, but it was undeniable. And when compared to similar images taken at the same location and time, the anomaly stood out even more. It wasn't a mistake, it was a clue. The public, meanwhile, continued to speculate. Could a child so small truly have been digitally inserted? Would a family go to such lengths for privacy, or for a carefully curated image? The discussions were relentless, fueled by curiosity, skepticism, and the human fascination with secrets. Shadows, invisible to many, had become evidence, a symbol, and a point of contention all at once. And just when it seemed the story had reached its peak, another layer emerged. One insider suggested that the shadow inconsistencies might not be accidental, but intentionally subtle, an almost imperceptible signal meant for those paying attention. If true, this revelation hinted at a level of foresight and intention far beyond simple photography or privacy concerns. The shadows, it seemed, might have been deliberately crafted, leaving the smallest trace of truth hidden in plain sight. The world watched, analyzed, and speculated, but one question remained unanswered. Why would anyone manipulate the shadows of the youngest royal? What message, if any, were they sending? And what would happen if this hidden detail were exposed to the public in full? Because what the experts were about to uncover next would reveal secrets even deeper than shadows themselves. And it would change everything people thought they knew about this photograph. The photograph had gone viral. Screenshots multiplied across social media, discussions erupted in forums, and professional analysts weighed in with alarming observations. And then, almost as quickly as it appeared, the image vanished from official channels. The sudden disappearance sparked a wave of speculation. Why would a family, already accustomed to the glare of public scrutiny, remove a photograph that seemed so harmless? The timing of the retraction was telling. Within hours of its initial posting, insiders reported that the couple, or their communications team, noticed the mounting public scrutiny. Screenshots had begun circulating, highlighting the anomalies in shadows, light, and positioning. The moment it became clear that people were analyzing the image down to individual pixels, the decision was made to retract it. Some suggest this was a simple act of damage control. Others viewed it as an acknowledgement that something in the image might not withstand intense scrutiny. Online, the reaction was immediate. Fans who had barely noticed the subtle inconsistencies now zoomed in on every detail, eager to capture the fleeting evidence before it disappeared entirely. Social media posts declared the retraction a confirmation of the edits, while others argued it was simply a precaution, a way to prevent overexposure of a private moment. The debate raged, with opinions ranging from support to outrage. Every action, or in this case removal, fueled the narrative that something unusual had occurred. The logistics of the retraction revealed the complexity of controlling public perception in the digital age. Removing an image from one platform is easy. Ensuring it disappears completely is nearly impossible. Within minutes, countless copies had been saved, shared, and reposted. Fans on Reddit, Twitter, and Instagram preserved every version, annotating anomalies and creating their own analyses. The retraction, rather than quelling curiosity, amplified it. It transformed a quiet family moment into a global mystery. The technical details of the retraction suggest a deliberate attempt to manage perception. The original photograph had been approved for release, presumably after careful review by a communications team. Yet once public scrutiny intensified, steps were taken to limit access. The rapid deletion of the official post signaled awareness of the controversy, but it also raised new questions. Was the photograph flawed from the beginning? Was the decision to remove it preemptive or reactive? And most importantly, what did the removal say about the authenticity of what viewers had already seen? The response of the public was telling. Internet sleuths, having anticipated such a move, quickly archived the image. Screenshots flooded fan pages, each accompanied by annotations, arrows pointing to shadows, and notes on inconsistencies. The retraction inadvertently created a permanent record of the controversy, one that could be studied indefinitely. What was meant to be a fleeting correction instead became evidence, a trail that no deletion could erase. Journalists and commentators quickly picked up the story. Headlines speculated about the reasons behind the removal. Royal family retracts photo amid shadow controversy. Is Lilibet really in the picture? Image taken down after public scrutiny, and digital manipulation suspected as royal photo disappears. Every news outlet contributed to the frenzy, and public attention intensified. The disappearance of the image became as significant as the content itself. Insiders suggested that the retraction was not just about the photograph, but about narrative control. In an era where every detail of public life is scrutinized, a single imperfection can dominate the conversation. The family likely recognized that leaving the image up, knowing that anomalies had been spotted, would fuel continued debate. Removing it was a way to regain some control, to prevent further questioning. Yet the speed with which the public captured and preserved the photograph rendered that attempt largely symbolic. The technical aspects of the removal also highlight the challenges faced by public figures in the digital age. Once something is online, it cannot truly be erased. Screenshots, reposts, and archives ensure that the information remains accessible, and every attempt at retraction only draws more attention. In this case, the photograph's removal made it a target for analysis, discussion, and speculation, transforming it into a case study of media manipulation, public perception, and the limits of control. From a psychological perspective, the act of retraction created a paradoxical effect. By removing the image, the family signaled that there was something worth hiding, prompting even more intense scrutiny. People began questioning the motives behind the deletion. Was it privacy? Was it shame? Was it an attempt to maintain a carefully curated public image? The ambiguity fueled fascination, and curiosity spread like wildfire across social media platforms. Fans and commentators dissected the timeline meticulously. Within hours of the posting, online communities noted the first signs of scrutiny, shadows analyzed, lighting inconsistencies discussed, and subtle anomalies pointed out. Soon after, the photograph disappeared. The sequence suggested a reactive decision, taken in response to the intensity of public attention. Observers noted that the speed of the retraction implied high-level awareness of the debate, adding to the sense that something significant was being hidden. But there was also a human element to consider. For Harry and Meghan, the photograph represented a private moment, one that likely held deep emotional significance. The intense scrutiny, combined with the technical analysis and viral discussions, could have felt intrusive, even overwhelming. Removing the image may have been as much about preserving family privacy as it was about controlling public perception. Yet the very act of deletion ensured that the moment would not remain private. It became a story in itself. The implications extended beyond this single image. The retraction highlighted the delicate balance between public life and private reality for the royal family. Every photograph, every public appearance, every media release is subject to intense analysis. The stakes are high, and small errors or inconsistencies can have outsized consequences. The photograph of Lilibet, with its subtle anomalies, demonstrated just how precarious that balance can be. A single shadow, a slight misalignment of light, a tiny detail can spark global debate and force rapid responses. Experts also weighed in on the effect of the retraction. From a communications perspective, removing an image can signal acknowledgement of error, but it can also create suspicion. The public, having already captured and shared the photograph, interprets the act of deletion in multiple ways. Was it an admission of manipulation, a protective measure, or simply a routine correction? The ambiguity only fuels speculation, ensuring that the story continues to evolve. As the days following the retraction unfolded, discussions intensified. Media outlets revisited the photograph, fan communities created detailed analyses, and online debates proliferated. Every new angle, every new observation, contributed to the growing sense that the image was more than it appeared. The shadows, the lighting, and the composition all became clues in a larger mystery. And at the center of that mystery was a single question: why would the photograph be removed if it were genuine? Public fascination did not wane. Instead, the act of retraction added layers of drama, intrigue, and speculation. People began imagining possible scenarios: a digital insertion for privacy, a staged family moment, or an intentional deception. Each theory sparked debate, with supporters and skeptics weighing the evidence. The photograph, and its sudden disappearance, became a symbol of the complex relationship between celebrity, privacy, and public expectation. Yet, even amid the controversy, a new revelation was emerging. Insiders hinted that the photograph's removal was only part of a broader strategy. It wasn't merely about one image. It was about managing the narrative surrounding Lilibet, the youngest member of the family, and controlling the public's perception of the family unit. If true, the retraction was a calculated move, a small but deliberate act in a much larger game of image management. And just when it seemed that the public had exhausted every possible angle, another detail came to light, one that suggested the retraction itself might have been part of the story, designed to draw attention to a particular anomaly, to create a mystery, and to spark discussion. The disappearance of the photograph was no longer a reaction. It was a catalyst, ensuring that curiosity would continue to grow. The world was left watching, analyzing, and speculating. The photograph, now absent from official channels, had taken on a life of its own. Every shadow, every light inconsistency, and every deleted image became fodder for discussion, interpretation, and debate. The public could no longer see the photograph as a simple family snapshot. It had become a symbol of secrecy, manipulation, and the fragility of public perception. But what came next would escalate the controversy even further, revealing secrets behind the retraction that no one anticipated. And it would change the way people saw not just the photograph, but the family itself. The photograph's disappearance did more than spark speculation. It ignited a wildfire of reactions from fans across the globe. People who had once scrolled past images of the royal family with casual interests suddenly became investigators, commentators, and theorists. They dissected every frame, analyzed every shadow, and debated the implications endlessly online. Social media feeds were flooded with screenshots, annotations, and side-by-side comparisons, all focused on one central question: was Lilibet really in the photo? Reddit threads dedicated solely to the photograph grew overnight. One popular thread titled "Lilibet or Photoshop" amassed tens of thousands of comments in a matter of days. Users shared zoomed-in sections of the image, highlighting subtle discrepancies in shadows, reflections, and lighting. Some posts included painstaking diagrams demonstrating how sunlight should fall across figures in the scene versus how it appeared in the photograph. Every comment was analyzed, every point contested, and every new observation fueled the collective obsession. Twitter became a battleground of opinions. Some fans defended the family, suggesting that any edits were simply for privacy or aesthetic reasons. They argued that the youngest royal deserved protection from constant media attention and that small adjustments to a public photograph were understandable. Others were skeptical, pointing to inconsistencies as evidence of deliberate manipulation, accusing the family of fabricating a moment that never truly existed. Hashtags like #InvisiblePrincess and #RoyalPhotoControversy trended worldwide, drawing attention from mainstream media and digital content creators alike. YouTube commentators joined the fray with detailed breakdowns of the photograph. Creators uploaded videos demonstrating step-by-step analysis of shadows, angles, and lighting inconsistencies. Some even reconstructed the scene digitally, using 3D models and lighting software to show how a digitally inserted subject could be identified. These videos received millions of views within days, turning a single family photograph into a global conversation about authenticity, media literacy, and the ethics of public imagery. Emotional reactions ran the gamut. Some viewers expressed awe at the technical scrutiny applied to the image, marveling at the power of observation and digital analysis. Others felt a sense of betrayal, as if the family they admired had deliberately misled the public. Questions of trust permeated comments and discussions, Can we ever believe what we see online? Are even intimate family moments curated and staged for public consumption? The smallest details in the photograph, the tilt of a head, the shadow under a foot, the highlight on an outfit, became symbols of a broader debate about truth, perception, and celebrity culture. Fan theories were particularly creative. Some speculated that the digital insertion of Lilibet, if true, was part of a broader strategy to control her public appearances. Others suggested more elaborate scenarios, that the baby was intentionally positioned in a way that could be digitally removed or replaced depending on the desired narrative. A smaller subset of theorists even hypothesized that the photograph might contain hidden signals for those paying attention, subtle cues intentionally left by the family or the photographers. While these theories range from plausible to wildly speculative, they highlighted the intense scrutiny applied to every pixel of the image. The international scope of the reactions was staggering. From North America to Europe, Asia, and Australia, fans dissected the photograph with astonishing precision. Forums translated posts into multiple languages, allowing viewers from around the world to contribute to a growing repository of analysis. News outlets reported on the fan reactions, often framing them as a new form of citizen-led journalism. Ordinary people, armed with curiosity and digital tools, challenging narratives presented by those in power. Psychologically, the phenomenon revealed something deeper about fandom and celebrity culture. For years, royal fans had been conditioned to admire, defend, or critique the family based on curated public appearances. But this photograph, and the potential anomaly it contained, disrupted the usual dynamic. Fans were no longer passive observers. They had become active participants in deciphering reality. The shared experience of discovery, analysis, and debate created a sense of community, even as disagreements and conflicts played out publicly. Some fans expressed frustration at what they perceived as a lack of transparency. If the image had been altered for privacy, why not acknowledge it? Why leave inconsistencies that fueled debate? Others defended the family's right to control their image, pointing out the relentless scrutiny and media intrusion they face daily. These conflicting viewpoints reflected broader societal questions about the boundaries between public interest and personal privacy, especially for figures living under constant observation. Humor and satire also found a place in the discussion. Memes proliferated, depicting the invisible princess in impossible scenarios, floating above the lawn, casting shadows where none should exist, or interacting with objects that weren't there. Some were playful, others biting, but all contributed to the viral nature of the conversation. The photograph had become more than just an image. It was now a cultural touchstone, inspiring commentary, creativity, and debate on a massive scale. The controversy also had ripple effects on other media coverage. Articles exploring the ethics of digital editing in celebrity photography gained prominence. Experts in photography, digital forensics, and media ethics were interviewed, providing analysis and commentary for mainstream audiences. The photograph had inadvertently become a case study, a teaching tool, and a catalyst for discussion about technology, authenticity, and public perception. Amid the global reactions, a few surprising voices emerged. Former palace staff and insiders offered their own perspectives, some defending the family, others hinting at the pressures and constraints that might have influenced the photograph's production. While many of these accounts were anecdotal, they added another layer to the narrative, suggesting that the image and its subsequent retraction were part of a broader strategy to manage public perception. For many fans, the photograph had ceased to be about a simple family moment. It was now about trust, authenticity, and the complexities of life in the public eye. Every observation, every theory, every pixel analyzed contributed to a growing sense of fascination and tension. The smallest details, a shadow misaligned, a highlight brighter than expected, the tilt of a tiny head, were now emblematic of a larger struggle. The tension between reality and perception, privacy and public interest, truth and narrative. And yet, as the fan reactions continued to pour in, the story was far from over. The discussions, debates, and analyses were not just reactions. They were clues, feeding into a larger understanding of the photograph, the family, and the subtle manipulations that may have shaped public perception. Every new comment, every shared screenshot, Every viral post contributed to an ongoing investigation that spanned the globe. But even with all this attention, a new twist was about to